Hey, so I know I said I probably wasn't doing any more classic Mega Man games after 6, but I changed my mind, so surprise. With the Mega Man X series, Capcom had found the franchise's new footing for the 16-bit generation. Even though keeping up the yearly release cycle meant that the games would continue to be a bit paint by numbers in terms of structure, at least the X games reinvented things and livened up the gameplay with speedier, high-octane action and smooth controls. Mega Man X and its first sequel had paved the path for the future of the brand, and it established that the Mega Man of the Super Nintendo was one worthy of the jump in technology. And so, in that light, it does seem a bit strange for them to release another classic-style game smack dab in the middle of this newfound momentum, with the first and only classic Mega Man game to be made for the SNES, Mega Man 7. Taking place 6 months after the events of Mega Man 6, Mega Man 7 tells us that Dr. Wily has in fact seen actual incarceration for his international crimes during the first annual robot tournament. Of course, Wily is a man who always has a few dozen backup plans in place, and in this case, he had a new batch of robot masters hidden away, programmed with a failsafe to self-activate and locate Dr. Wily in the event that he failed to interact with them for 6 months. Yeah, he didn't program them to seek out and destroy Dr. Light's lab or fight Mega Man, just to break him out of prison and then piss off to cause random destruction. But I guess that fits his MO. I'm not gonna say that Dr. Wily has always been a reasonable guy. As Wily's new robot masters break him out of prison and begin to devastate the nearby city of... city, the gameplay begins, quite surprisingly, with an intro stage, just like the X games. This is a trend you'll see a few times here, wherein the game borrows aspects from the various spin-offs and sub-series that were usually left out of the classic games. It was a great idea for the classic series to co-opt the intro stage in particular, as they offer a great opportunity to teach the player some basic controls and mechanics before throwing them into the deep end. At the end of the stage, Mega Man is greeted by new character Bass and his robot dog Treble, obvious parallels to Mega Man and Rush, and while this does act as a boss battle, the player is not actually required to win here. Bass evidently has no ill will toward Mega Man, and the game will continue regardless of the outcome, although Bass's dialogue will be changed to reflect either victor. I get the impression that Mega Man is supposed to lose here, and in fact, I had so little health the first time I got to this fight that the game just considered it an instant loss, but of course I had to win at least once, so I loaded up the game again so I can beat him the second time. Once the game properly begins, Mega Man 7 switches up the formula a bit by only offering 4 of the 8 robot masters to choose from at first. Personally, this seems like a really strange decision that I'm not really a fan of. While each Mega Man game tends to have 1 or 2 favored or optimized stage orders to choose, the ability to tackle each stage in any order was one of the franchise's defining traits from day one. Splitting the usual 8 stages into 2 separate groups of 4 seems very arbitrary, and I don't see any real benefit of doing it this way. There is a mandatory mid-game stage that you visit after the first 4 bosses are gone, but they could have had this trigger after beating any 4, like how the X-Hunters in X2 will show up after beating any 2 Mavericks. I just really don't get why they split the boss roster down the middle like this. After clearing the mid-game Robot Museum stage to unlock the last 4 Robot Masters, Mega Man encounters an injured Bass in Shademan's stage. Seeing no reason to distrust Bass, Mega Man urges him to Dr. Light's lab for repairs. But of course, Bass betrays them. As soon as the repairs are finished, Bass and Treble reveal that they are creations of Dr. Wily, powered by Bassnium, which isn't relevant, I just think it's dumb and silly, and they proceed to turn the lab into ruin as they steal the blueprints for a new Mega Man upgrade. Mega Man proceeds to follow Bass to Wily's newest lab castle thing, and there he faces each Robot Master again, as well as a new version of Gutsman. Bass's new super armor proves to be no match for Mega Man either, and after defeating Wily for what seems like the millionth time, Mega Man actually considers ending him once and for all. At least in the English version. The Japanese game has Mega Man appear much more contemplative about it, but English Mega Man, I guess, decided he's finally had enough of Wily's bullshit. Although in Mega Man's brief hesitation, Wily is bailed out by Bass at the last second. Wily's lab explodes as Mega Man makes it to safety, with his somewhat hollow victory punctuated by a shooting star. Which I guess sets up the plot of the next game, but who knows if they had actually planned that far ahead yet. It's probably just a frickin' star. Mega Man 7 has a lot of things to find in each stage, again taking from the Mega Man X games in that respect, where the player can return to old stages to find new upgrades once they found the correct weapon or tool. The new Rush Search can be acquired and used to dig up secret items or upgrades at specific spots. The Rush Jet returns, of course, as does Beat, although his function has been completely changed. Instead of acting as a weapon, Beat now rescues Mega Man from falling into bottomless pits up to a maximum of 4 times per stage. Those first 4 Robot Master stages each contain one of the 4 hidden Rush Plates, and finding and retrieving them all will grant Mega Man the Super Adapter, equipable armor that serves as both of the armor upgrades from Mega Man 6 combined, a jet-powered double jump, and a powerful wind-up punch, although you sacrifice the ability to slide while wearing it. It is nice to have both the jet and punch functions without having to swap between 2 armors anymore, although you can't easily switch to your other weapons without entering the pause menu. Mega Man 7 inherited the X game's ability to quick swap between your different Robot Master weapons using the L and R buttons, and it's kind of annoying that the Super Adapter disables this functionality. I guess maybe they didn't want the player to accidentally deactivate the armor mid-jump or something, but it still bothered me that I had to go into the menu each time. Proto Man is also hiding out in a few stages to give Mega Man hints, and if you find him in both locations, without quitting or getting a game over, you can then locate him in a secret area in Shade Man's stage. There, you'll fight him to receive his Proto Shield, an equipable item that blocks certain projectiles. It only works when Mega Man is standing completely still, though, and also has to be manually equipped from the menu like the Super Adapter. It would have been great as a simple upgrade to the standard Buster weapon, but as it stands, it's really little more than a novelty item. Mega Man 7 also sees the dev team borrowing from the oft-overlooked Game Boy Mega Man titles in that there is an in-game shop. Players can collect bolts throughout the various stages that act as currency for the shop owner, Otto, who will use them to create various items for Mega Man. These can range from standard consumables like 1-ups, E-tanks, and the like, but you can also use it to purchase permanent upgrades that would otherwise need to be found hidden within the game stages, like the Rush Jet or Search or Beat's Whistles. If you find and return Otto's missing Hyper Bolt, he'll chop all his prices in half and also add the Hyper Rocket Buster to his stock, which adds a homing capability to the Super Adapter's Rocket Punch. The shop would become a recurring element of the classic Mega Man series after this, although in this instance the game never tells you about the shop or gives you any instruction on how to access it, which seems like a pretty big oversight. You get to the shop by pressing select on the stage select screen, and the only way I learned this was by looking it up for myself. The weapons in this game are probably the most interesting thing about it, since the dev team wanted the weapons to have additional environmental effects this time. Scorch Wheel is effective against an impressive 3 Robot Masters, and also functions as a shield, burns trees in Slash Man's stage, and lights candelabras in Shade Man's stage. Danger Wrap can be used to restrict enemy movement, whereupon you can push them into other foes to create a massive impact. And by holding down while firing, Mega Man can set bombs up to 3 at a time. Junk Shield will gradually dissipate as it absorbs hits, and most larger enemies and bosses will just shrug it off, but it's still useful for running through hordes of weak enemies and farming for health or ammo. The shield weapons tend to be my most used in these games. And the Slash Claw is a short-range killer. Most notably, it can be used to reflect the rocks that the new and improved Gutsman tosses at you. Thunderbolt is probably the most versatile weapon of the game. It will disable Junkman's special attacks, as well as activate the machinery throughout his stage. However, not only are Springman and Turbo Man immune to it, it will actually make them stronger. Springman will gain magnetism and a strong grapple move, while Turbo Man will become completely invincible and refuse to revert from his vehicle mode. Wild Coil, in contrast, is a bit more divisive. It only becomes truly useful in its charged state, and you also need to hold up on the D-pad while firing to get the most height out of it. I got the hang of it before too long, but I can see why many consider it the least useful of the weapons. But probably most interesting in my opinion is the Noise Crush. It fires a sound wave that bounces off walls, which Mega Man can then absorb by jumping into the ricochet, turning the next shot fired into a much larger and more powerful blast. Besides just the unique theming, as it's the only sound-based weapon in the classic series, it also has a powerful pair of glitches you can exploit. If fired as soon as the player enters Turbo Man or Springman's arenas, the game will register damage from the hits before their health bar even spawns in, killing them instantly if done correctly. And the bosses in Mega Man 7 are all pretty solid, no real standouts of either the good or bad variety, but during the game's planning, Inafune told the team, "Let's make the last fight insanely hard." And so the final boss with Wily is an absolute menace and has become rather infamous. It teleports around, fires homing projectiles 4 at a time that can either freeze, burn, or shock you, and is immune to all but 3 weapons aside from the standard charge shot: the Super Adapter, the Freeze Cracker, and the Wild Coil. The latter of those is his official weakness, dealing double the damage of the others, but considering the others only deal 1 damage each, it's not much of a bump up. Many people decide not to bother with it, as the coil can be difficult to aim effectively, and so the Freeze Cracker tends to be the preferred method for many, while with its quick rate of fire and diagonal aiming. But once I learned that the ever-adaptable Thunderbolt, while dealing no damage, will disrupt his attack cycle and prevent his homing shots entirely, it became much easier to just dodge his predictable ground-based shots while waiting for him to get into a good position to hit him with the coil. I was lucky to stumble into that Thunderbolt trick on my first attempt, and I was then able to soundly defeat Wily without much issue on my second. Once the credits roll, you'll be shown a code that can be used to send you to the final Wily stage with every upgrade unlocked, but if you input the code while also holding L and R, you can unlock a secret competitive 2-player mode. 2 players, as either Mega Man or Bass, can use a variety of Street Fighter-style button commands to go one-on-one. It's nothing terribly complex or substantial, but given that it was apparently created in just 2 days the week before the game went into beta testing, I'd say it works fine as a fun little Easter egg. And speaking of Easter eggs, when you enter Shademan stage for the first time, you can hold down the B button to switch the music to the main theme from another Capcom game, Ghosts and Goblins. The team seemed to be really fond of Shademan, come to think of it, as that's also where you'll encounter the story event with Bass, and where you fight Proto Man after finding him in the other stages. Mega Man 7's development really was something to behold. After the release of X2, the same team immediately went to work on Mega Man 7 with a dev cycle that began and ended in a ridiculously short 3-month window. And given this insane deadline, it's frankly a miracle they managed to put out a functioning game at all. This does put into perspective why the game seems to borrow so many concepts and design elements from elsewhere in the franchise, but I can't help but wonder if maybe Capcom should have just set Ixnay on the game and just went straight to X3 instead. Going back to the classic formula after 2 X games really only served to shine a brighter light on how stiff and slow those classic games really felt. By now, we had been taught to expect a SNES Mega Man to zip through vast and complex levels with dash and climb moves, and going back to a very slow, very mechanical control scheme really demonstrated why the franchise so desperately needed such a reinvention in the first place. It just feels like a step back. But while Mega Man 7 is clearly a rushed game and yet another cookie-cutter Mega Man sequel, I still wouldn't call it a bad game. There are no glaring, game-breaking bugs, which is honestly impressive on its own given its ludicrously quick turnaround time, but I also wouldn't call it a great game either. Bass and Treble are interesting additions to the cast, but Mega Man 7 didn't really try anything new. It just pulled together all the best aspects of other Mega Man games in the hopes that they would form something greater than the sum of their parts. And frankly, it fell short. It just so painfully pales in the shadow of the first 2 Mega Man X games, the first of which was barely over a year old at this point. A new classic-style console Mega Man title just simply wasn't needed at this point in time. The slow, methodical platforming and rigid shooting of the classic games just immediately lost its luster pretty much as soon as Mega Man X came onto the scene. And the classic formula hadn't been gone long enough for nostalgia to be some sort of hook either. It would have made total sense for the X series to just become the console Mega Man series moving forward, if for no other reason than to simply avoid oversaturating the brand. As it is, though, what we ended up with was a Mega Man game where the most honest praise I can give is it's playable.